Hi, I'm Delara, and my parents stole my $3 million lottery ticket. Not a stranger, not a thief in the night, my own blood. Why? Because I said no to my sister. They called it selfish. They called it ungrateful. Then they broke into my apartment, opened my safe, and disappeared with the ticket. Like it was theirs all along. The next morning, I woke up to 45 missed calls. But that wasn't the worst part. What really gutted me was realizing it wasn't the first time they'd erased me from my own life. So I have to ask, how far would your family go to make you disappear quietly? Let me tell you what happened next. I knew something was off the moment I stepped through my parents' front door. The smell of roast chicken filled the air, just like every first Sunday of the month. But the energy, if you've ever walked into a room where people are trying too hard to act normal, you'll know what I mean. Mom, Vera, greeted me at the door with a brightness in her voice that didn't quite reach her eyes. Dad, Alton, offered me his usual side hug, but even that felt too rehearsed. I took off my coat and hung it on the rack I'd stared at most of my teenage years, noticing it had been replaced with a newer, fancier one. My sister Callista's Instagram perfect taste, no doubt. She wasn't there yet. Typical. At the dinner table, Mom kept giving me these sideways glances, like she was waiting for me to say something important. I didn't plan on telling them. I really didn't. But part of me wanted to be seen for once. Not as the stable one, the dependable one, the one who doesn't ask for help, but as someone with news. Big news. So over mashed potatoes and green beans, I said it. Casual, like I was telling them I got a new haircut. I won the lottery. Silence. My fork hit the plate louder than I intended. Wait, like a scratch-off? Dad asked, blinking. No, state lottery, 6 numbers, 3 million. Mom's mouth dropped open. She stood up slowly, walked around the table, and hugged me. Tight. Too tight. The kind of hug you give someone when you've just spotted a golden goose. Oh, honey, that's incredible, she said. I waited for the questions. How are you feeling? What are you going to do with it? But instead, Callista is going to be thrilled, Mom added quickly, stepping back. She's had such a rough few months, Dad chuckled. Couldn't have come at a better time, right, sweetheart? I blinked. My chest tightened. The warmth in the room suddenly turned sterile. It wasn't about me anymore. It never really was it? Just as I tried to shake the thought away, the front door creaked open. Callista swept in, sunglasses still on, carrying a Louis Vuitton knockoff and the scent of expensive perfume. Sorry I'm late, she sang. Traffic was insane. Guess what your sister just told us? Mom blurted out before I could say anything. Callista gasped dramatically, eyes wide. You're pregnant? I half laughed, mostly out of shock. No, lottery. Her face lit up like she'd just found out she was getting a reality show. Oh my God, Mac, that's amazing. We're gonna crush my credit card debt together. You're literally saving me. The words hit me harder than I expected. Actually, I'm not planning to give money to anyone right now, I said, as gently as I could. The temperature in the room dropped. Callista blinked. Wait! What? Mom leaned forward, smile tightening. Sweetheart, don't be selfish. Families support each other, especially in moments like this. Dad nodded, setting down his fork. We raised you better than that. I stared at them, my appetite gone. They didn't ask why. They didn't ask how I felt. They didn't even blink before deciding what was owed to them. I smiled politely, even as something in my chest fractured. Excuse me, I murmured, standing up. They barely looked up as I grabbed my coat and keys. As I opened the front door, I heard Mom say behind me, She's probably just overwhelmed. She'll come around. I walked out into the crisp evening, the sun just beginning to set behind the row of tidy houses that all looked the same. Driving home, my phone buzzed in the passenger seat. One missed call. Callista. I didn't pick up. I let it ring. Monday mornings are usually quiet in my apartment. A soft hum from the fridge, the occasional creak from the floorboards, and sunlight creeping through the blinds. That morning, though, the silence was shattered by the non-stop buzz of my phone. I opened one eye and turned over. The screen glared back at me. 45 missed calls. Not texts. Calls. I sat up, heart pounding. Callista's name led the list, followed by Mom, Dad, and then, somehow, my Aunt Sylvia, my cousin Ethan, even the old landline from my parents' house. I hadn't spoken to half of them in years. There wasn't a single, "Are you okay?" among the voicemails. I played the first one. Mom's voice, sweet as syrup. "Delara, honey, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're just trying to help you see reason." Next one, Callista. "It's not about me. It's about family. We don't get to choose each other, but we show up. You're showing up wrong." And then Dad's. "You've changed. This isn't the daughter we raised. We taught you better than this." I stopped listening. My stomach turned. Not one of them asked how I was doing. Not one asked why I said no. Just layered guilt, wrapped in family platitudes. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself some coffee, and tried to breathe. But it didn't help. I felt like the air was thick with something unspoken, something rotting. I told myself they were just caught off guard, that they'd cool off, that once the dust settled, maybe we could talk like people again. But then the email came. "Dear Ms. Prescott," it read, "we've identified potentially unauthorized activity associated with your financial profile. Please review recent movement notifications for your linked accounts." I froze. The lottery ticket. I nearly dropped the mug. I sprinted to the bedroom, pulled the small safe from under the bed, and checked. The envelope was still inside, sealed, pressed flat between two hardcover books. I hadn't touched it since placing it there. But that email planted something in my chest that no amount of logic could soothe. I grabbed my laptop and logged into my bank account. Nothing unusual at first glance, but the warning was there in red text. "Suspicious activity detected. Please confirm recent requests related to large fund processing." I called the bank. Long hold. Cold-voiced representative. "At this time, we can't disclose further details without identity verification. You'll need to come in." "But I haven't submitted any request," I said. "I understand, Ms. Prescott," she replied, in a tone that suggested she didn't understand anything at all. I ended the call and just sat there. Still. Not angry, not yet, just cornered. It's the strangest thing, the way trust cracks. It doesn't always happen in dramatic bursts. Sometimes it splinters quietly, spreading through the foundation of everything you thought was solid. Later that afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror, phone in one hand, the safe key in the other. My reflection looked tired, older than I remembered. "Am I being paranoid?" I whispered, "or am I already under attack?" I opened the safe again. The envelope was still there, but my certainty wasn't. My phone lit up. Incoming call. Mom. I let it ring. I let all of it ring. It was Wednesday afternoon, just a few days after the dinner that still echoed in my mind like a bad recording. I had taken a long walk through Cheeseman Park, trying to shake the tension, hoping a little sun and movement might uncoil the knots in my chest. But even the breeze felt like it was whispering behind my back. When I got back to my apartment, the air inside felt different, still like a room that had been disturbed and put back together too neatly. I paused at the doorway, my keys still dangling in my hand. Something was wrong, though I couldn't name it yet. My instinct led me straight to the bedroom. I dropped my bag gently on the floor, crouched down, and slid open the closet door. I pulled the small gray safe from beneath my stack of winter sweaters. The keypad greeted me with a green blink. I entered the code slowly, deliberately. The lock clicked open. My breath caught. The books were still there, exactly where I left them. But the envelope, the one holding the most important piece of paper I'd ever owned, was gone. Gone. I sank to the floor. My legs refused to hold me. I opened the safe wider, shoved aside the books, even turned the safe upside down. Nothing. My pulse rang in my ears. My mind refused to accept what my eyes were telling me. Then I remembered the keypad log. I pressed the small black button inside the safe, scrolling through the access history. The display flashed. Last opened, Monday, 1 to 12 p.m. I was at work at that time, in a staff meeting, and suddenly I knew, not suspected, knew. They had a key, the spare I gave them a year ago when I had the flu and couldn't get out of bed. I never asked for it back. Why would I? They were my parents. I shot up, practically running through the apartment. Nothing else looked touched. The jewelry box on my dresser? Still there? My laptop? Untouched. Even the dishes in the sink were exactly how I left them. But then I checked the little security cam I had tucked behind the plant in the living room, meant more for package thieves than intruders. It was off. When I opened the back panel, the batteries were missing. They knew it was there. They'd planned this. I stood in the middle of the room, staring at nothing, trying to breathe through the weight pressing down on my chest. This was betrayal layered on betrayal. Not a moment of weakness or desperation. A choice. A coordinated, quiet break-in under the mask of family. And it wasn't even the first time. I found myself in front of the old file cabinet, tucked in the hallway closet. I hadn't touched those drawers in years, just a mess of tax returns, report cards, and papers I never got around to shredding. I pulled open the bottom drawer and began digging. Toward the back, folded into a manila folder labeled High School, I found what I didn't realize I was looking for. A letter. From my high school principal. It was dated my junior year. I remembered that week, Callista had skipped a major math test. I had been suspended for academic dishonesty after a teacher claimed I gave her answers. I had always doubted the story, but never had proof otherwise. Until now. The letter was an apology. It explained that new information had come to light years later, implicating a mix-up in school records. My name had been attached in error. At the bottom was a note, handwritten in my mother's looping cursive. Tell them Delara started it. Callista's too fragile to take the blame. I dropped the letter on the floor. My throat tightened. This had always been the script. Delara is strong. Delara will understand. Delara can take it. They'd been feeding me that line for decades. But now it wasn't about detentions or college essays. This was my life, my money, my future. And they had stolen it without blinking. I turned to my desk, still shaking, and opened my laptop. The browser was already set on the Colorado State Lottery homepage. I clicked over to the claim form, scrolling through the requirements for submitting a prize. They thought that ticket was everything. They thought they'd taken the power from me. They were wrong. The invitation came through a voicemail on Thursday morning. Mom's voice had that smooth, drawn-out tone she reserved for holidays and social events, where appearances mattered more than truth. Delara, sweetie, let's have dinner tonight. Just us, as a family. Let's talk things through. I didn't answer right away. I just replayed the message 3 times while sipping cold coffee, watching the cursor blink on an open email I hadn't finished. I already knew the ticket was gone. I knew who took it. What I didn't know, yet, was what they'd try next. I texted her back a single word. Okay. The drive to Aurora was quiet, too quiet for my thoughts to stay still. I had the safe logs printed out and tucked in a folder inside my bag, though I had no intention of showing them. Not yet. Not until I saw what card they played first. When I walked into the house, everything looked pristine. Candlelit table, cloth napkins, the kind of meal Mom only put together when company was coming or when guilt needed disguising. "Hi, baby," she said, pulling me into a long hug. "You look tired. Are you sleeping?" "I'm sleeping fine," I replied, stepping back. Her hands lingered on my arms for a moment longer than necessary. Dad gave me a nod from across the room. He was already at the table, glass of wine in hand, reading the Denver Post, like we weren't about to have the most awkward dinner of our lives. We sat, we passed food, small talk. Nothing said about money, not at first. Then, just as I took a bite of green beans, Mom cleared her throat. "You know," she began gently. Sometimes when people go through a big change, they misplace things. That's normal. I looked up. Her eyes were fixed on me with that same syrupy concern she used when I was 12 and lost my retainer. Dad added, "Nobody's accusing anybody, of course. We're just worried. You've had a lot on your plate lately." I set my fork down, slow and deliberate. I didn't misplace anything. I locked it up. I know exactly where I put it. Mom's smile didn't budge, but her voice tightened. "Well, stress can play tricks on memory. I know it does for me." I stared at her, saying nothing. The silence spread like a stain across the table. We moved on to dessert, or tried to. She brought out her signature lemon pie. I declined. That's when Callista walked in, 20 minutes late and unapologetic, carrying her laptop like a briefcase and smiling like she was about to pitch a new product. "Hey, fam," she chirped. "Sorry I'm late. Had to update a campaign post." Mom's face lit up. "Perfect timing, we were just talking." Callista opened her laptop right there at the table, spinning it to face me. A color-coded spreadsheet glared back at me. "I've outlined what I'll need to relaunch the brand. Marketing budget, production costs, social support. It's all really doable. Just under $80K to start." Dad leaned back in his chair. "We figured it's time we stopped acting like we're all on separate islands. This family's been too divided." Mom nodded. "It's time we work as a unit. No more isolation, no more secrets." The lemon pie sat untouched on my plate. I stared at the chart, the numbers, the assumptions. Callista's face beamed with practiced humility. I gave her a small smile. "I'll think about it." And I would. Not about giving her assent, but about how thoroughly I needed to shut this down. The rest of the evening passed in that kind of tight, fake harmony that families like mine knew how to perform well. I hugged them goodbye at the door, the kind of hug that said nothing and meant even less. In the car, I pulled out the folder from my bag and opened it on the passenger seat. The safe log, the exact timestamp of the breach, Monday, 1 to 12 p.m. I whispered to myself, let's see how far they're willing to go. Friday morning came with a cold edge, the kind of chill that didn't come from the weather, but from a knowing that sat low in your gut. I hadn't slept much the night before, too many fragments of phrases looping in my mind. Maybe you misplaced it. We're a family. It's time we work together. I didn't need more talk, I needed proof. I spent most of the morning combing through the folders stacked on my desk, the ones I hadn't touched in years. Eventually, I found the photocopy of the lottery ticket. My handwriting was unmistakable on the back, dated and initialed. Beneath that, the security log from my safe, the one that clearly showed the breach had happened while I was at work. I added those pages to a folder, along with a printed copy of the Lottery Commission's online claim submission protocol. By noon, I had called Romy. "Come by at 2, she said without hesitation, "and bring everything." Romy and I had been friends since college. She was the kind of person who never asked too many questions, but always got to the heart of the answer. She'd gone into estate and property law, while I carved out my space in corporate finance. I trusted her judgment more than anyone. Her office sat on the 6th floor of a quiet building near downtown. Minimalist decor, cool lighting, and a strong scent of lavender from the diffuser humming near her bookshelf. She gestured for me to sit as I placed the folder on her desk. "I need you to look at something," I said, already knowing what she'd find. She pulled out the signed transfer form Callista had submitted to the commission, public record, thanks to an inquiry she filed last week, and laid it side by side with my known signature on the ticket copy. She frowned. "It's similar, but this curve? The loop on the D? This is how you used to sign your name back in college." I looked at her. "I haven't signed that way in over 10 years. Romy tapped the page. This was pulled from something old. She didn't forge it from scratch. She lifted it from a document she had access to. And then it clicked. "The tax records," I murmured. "I left a box at my parents' house years ago. I never picked it up." She nodded. "Let's run a forensic check, just to be sure." 2 days later, the results came back. The ink didn't match the age of the document it claimed to be from. Too fresh. Worse yet, a partial fingerprint near the signature line matched Calliste's. A fingerprint she had no business being anywhere near. Romy leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "This isn't just shady, Dell. This is criminal." I stared at the printout, anger and grief competing in my throat. "I never thought they'd go this far," I said quietly. "You think this is revenge." "It's not," she said. "It's reclaiming what's rightfully yours." It wasn't about the money anymore, not really. It was about the principle. The years I had let things slide, let them minimize my presence to make room for someone else's mistakes. This was a line in the sand. Finally, I took a breath and nodded. "Let's file." We submitted the inquiry to the Lottery Commission that afternoon. Romy handled the language. I watched her fingers move across the keyboard, each keystroke feeling like one more piece of ground I was taking back. Later that night, as I sat on my couch, a text came through. "Callista. Hey sis, let's talk before you do anything rash." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because talking was never what she wanted. I didn't hear my phone buzzing until the 5th time it lit up my nightstand. It was just past 7 a.m. on Saturday, and I had barely opened my eyes before a barrage of notifications overtook the screen. Group chats I hadn't been active in since college, emails flagged urgent, and more missed calls. This time from friends, colleagues, even my old neighbor from middle school. One message simply said, "Is this about you?" I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and clicked the link someone had sent. It opened TikTok. Callista's face filled the screen, soft lighting, a melancholic piano score in the background, her eyes slightly red and glossy. Not from crying, I realized, but from knowing how to pose for impact. "I've been quiet about this," she began, voice trembling just enough, "because family means everything to me, and I never asked for help. But when I was drowning in debt, my sister, God bless her, stepped in and gave me everything. Out of love. Not because I begged. But now she wants it all back. No names, no direct blame, just implication. And that's all she needed." The comments underneath were a wildfire of sympathy and outrage. "Your sister sounds cruel. How can someone be so heartless? You're so brave for sharing this. Some people forget what family means when money's involved." I closed the app. My fingers shook, not from surprise, but from recognition. This wasn't a new story. Callista had always rewritten narratives to suit her, turning anyone who didn't orbit her into a villain. But now she had an audience of strangers, and they were eating it up. By Sunday evening, the video had over 2 million views, and not a single one of those people knew me. Monday came, and walking into my office felt like stepping into a room with one-way mirrors. The air was thick with that polite awkwardness that comes when people know something about you, but pretend they don't. My desk had been moved slightly. Someone had clearly been there. When I sat down, my manager, Greg, popped his head in. "Delara, got a sec?" He didn't even wait for a response. I followed him into his office, where the blinds were already closed. He gestured for me to sit, the way doctors do when they're about to tell you the results aren't what you hoped. "We're not here to pry," he started, "but there's been chatter. You've probably seen the posts. I just wanted to say we support you, but the team's been a little, well, thrown off." He didn't have to say more. I nodded. "Let me guess. It's bad for morale." His face reddened slightly. "We're not blaming you, but—" "You're blaming me," I said, voice flat. "Got it." Back at my desk, I stared at my monitor for a long time without moving. Emails blurred together. I could feel the eyes around me. The silence was louder than any confrontation. At lunch, I locked myself in the women's restroom and stared at the mirror over the sink. I looked small, but not broken. "They're turning the volume up on lies," I whispered. Time I stopped whispering the truth. By the time I got home, I already knew what I needed to do. I booted up my laptop, opened a private browser window, and typed, How to file a public defamation claim. I didn't press enter yet. My phone buzzed. New TikTok from Callista. I didn't click it. Not this time. It was just after lunch on Monday when I found the envelope wedged between the pages of my lease renewal paperwork. Thick, cream-colored paper. Urgent, stamped in red ink on the corner. No return address. Inside was a letter from a law firm. Not just any law firm. The one that handled my parents' home refinance, back when Callista was living off their credit and I was working 2 jobs to finish grad school. The language was neat, professional, and viciously passive. Cease all defamatory statements regarding Ms. Callista Prescott. Continued public accusations will be considered harassment. Our client reserves the right to pursue damages. I didn't even finish reading. They had weaponized a lawyer I once shook hands with at a family BBQ. A man who used to call me kiddo. Now he was threatening to sue me for speaking the truth. I scanned the next paragraph, and there it was, hidden under corporate politeness. Actions have jeopardized familial harmony and have caused emotional distress to multiple parties. It wasn't about legal rights. It was about guilt. I folded the letter and drove straight to Romy's office. She greeted me with her usual dry wit. "You're early. That's either a good sign or a terrible one." I handed her the envelope. She read silently for a minute. Then she scoffed. "This isn't legal protection. It's psychological warfare." She flipped the letter onto her desk and leaned back in her chair. "They're not trying to win in court. They're trying to shut you up before you get to one." I sat across from her, numb but clear-headed. "They think I'll be scared off by the family name on legal paper." "They think that because it's worked before," Romy said. "Not this time." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just reached into my bag and pulled out a printed screenshot. A partial copy of the lottery claim form I knew Callista had forged. Romy had obtained it through a back channel, and we'd been sitting on it, waiting for a move. It was time to make one of our own. By late afternoon, we had drafted an email. Using a temporary domain and dummy identity, we posed as a lottery tax consultant from the Colorado State Commission. Romy composed the message carefully, vague enough to sound real, clear enough to trigger panic. It was sent only to Callista. We waited. Less than 2 hours later, Callista forwarded the email, not to her attorney, not even to the firm that just threatened me. She sent it to Mom. Subject line untouched. One line added, "Should I delete this? Will it mess things up?" Romy looked up from her laptop, smirking. Well, that didn't take long. "They're not even pretending to follow legal channels," I said. "They never intended to," she replied. In that moment, something shifted in me. This wasn't about a family misunderstanding or even an ugly disagreement. This was a coordinated, deliberate effort to erase me from my own story, using paperwork, social media, and now law firms, and I wasn't going to let them. Back at home, I brewed a cup of tea I wouldn't drink and sat down at my desk. The night outside was quiet, but I didn't feel calm. I felt decisive. I opened a new email. To Colorado Lottery Commission. Subject, urgent inquiry, documentation fraud. I have new information, including evidence of attempted fraud. Can we schedule a call? The reply came 20 minutes later. We'll see you Thursday. Tuesday evening found me in the most mundane position, cleaning out old cloud storage. I wasn't doing it for any strategic reason at first. I think my brain just needed something repetitive, something numb, to silence the noise of what was coming. It was buried 3 folders deep under a long-dead smart home app I hadn't touched in years. The system had auto-synced for months before I canceled the subscription. I clicked through out of habit, more muscle memory than curiosity. And then, there it was, labeled Entry Cam 0417 MP4. I opened it, and my heart stopped mid-beat. The video was grainy, time-stamped a week ago. It showed my living room, viewed from the angle of the shelf camera I forgot I ever installed. Vera entered first, her posture careful but confident. Alton followed, glancing around the apartment like a man about to steal a loaf of bread from a church. They walked straight to my bedroom. Vera pulled the safe from under my sweaters with the ease of someone who had done it before. She entered the code, my birthday, and the safe popped open. She took the envelope, checked its contents, and smirked. She looked directly at the camera and turned it with her palm. I didn't need to see what happened next. I already knew. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the footage had been syncing to the cloud the entire time. Automatic. Quiet. Undeleted. I sat there staring at the screen, too stunned to speak. Romy arrived 20 minutes later. I didn't tell her over the phone. This needed to be seen. When she watched the video, she didn't speak for a full minute. Then she let out a slow, cold laugh. They never expected you'd outthink them. It's not just theft, I said quietly. They didn't just take the money. They stole the last part of me that believed they could ever change. Romy nodded. We're filing this with the commission, tonight. As she prepped the documents, I opened my encrypted email account, one I hadn't used since I left a toxic job a few years back. Waiting in my inbox was a message from a name I hadn't seen since high school. Dr. Heller. He'd been Callista's therapist when she was 16. He moved out of state years ago, left the practice. I didn't know he even remembered me. The subject line read, I know I shouldn't, but I have to. I opened it. Delara, I've struggled for weeks over whether to send this. I never broke confidentiality, but I watched your sister weaponize my sessions against people who challenged her narrative. Her patterns weren't situational. They were trained, enabled. I don't expect you to respond, but I want you to know. You are not imagining this. I stared at the words for what felt like forever. Clinical confirmation, not pity, not assumption, reality. By midnight, my kitchen table looked like a war room. The video file, the letter, the fingerprint report, safe access logs, screenshots of TikTok timestamps that didn't line up with Callista's sob stories. I laid them all out and labeled them clearly. When I zipped the files into a folder, I renamed it, Restoring Truth, Prepared for Court. Just after 1 a.m., my email chimed. It was from the Colorado Lottery Commission. Subject, Dispute Review Hearing, Thursday, 9:30 a.m. Attached was a calendar invite. I clicked Accept. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just whispered, let's see how brave they are with the lights on. Thursday morning arrived sharper than I expected. I didn't drink coffee. I couldn't. The nerves sat too high in my throat. Romy picked me up at 8:15 a.m., sharp. Her suit darker than usual, her voice calm but clipped. Neither of us said much during the drive. The Colorado Lottery Commission's building wasn't flashy. It was bureaucratic and beige, thick carpeting, humming fluorescent lights, the faint smell of recycled air. But the tension in the review room was anything but dull. We arrived first, just like we planned. I laid out the folder labeled Restoring Truth, Prepared for Court, on the table in front of us. At 9:23, they walked in. Vera wore charcoal gray, her hair pulled back tight enough to strain. Alton had trimmed his beard, shoes polished. And Callista looked like grief wrapped in cashmere. Neutral makeup, soft curls, a black turtleneck, and no jewelry. Like she was heading to a funeral, not a hearing. The panel, 3 members, middle-aged, all in muted colors, took their seats. Their expressions were unreadable. The lead commissioner welcomed everyone, then invited both parties to begin with brief statements. Before I could speak, Callista's attorney stood up and handed each panelist a printed screenshot. It's important the commission understands the emotional toll this has taken on my client, he said. She shared this publicly last night. I didn't need to look. I knew what it was. Still, I turned my head to Romy. She handed me her phone, already queued up. Callista's latest TikTok played. Dim lighting, gentle piano music. She sat on her bedroom floor, eyes downcast, voice trembling. I never wanted it to come to this. I just miss my sister. I miss who we were before money poisoned everything. Fake tears. A lie delivered with academy-level conviction. I clenched my jaw, not from hurt, but from fury. The lead commissioner cleared his throat and looked to me. I stood. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to rise. I spoke plainly, clearly, because I had something better than performance. I had proof. First, I presented the video. My parents in my apartment, opening the safe, taking the envelope. Vera's face frozen in a smirk at the camera. It played in full, no commentary. Then came the fingerprint report, the signature analysis, the forensic breakdown of the altered claim. Romy passed out printed statements for reference. Finally, I handed over a screenshot of the TikTok Callista posted, along with metadata logs from her creator dashboard, something she hadn't expected I'd get. It was filmed 2 days ago, I said, edited yesterday morning, scheduled for release last night. Silence followed, but the silence was different now, not suspicion, recognition. The panel didn't nod, they didn't gasp, but their eyes changed, and I knew I had shifted the balance. The session adjourned. As I gathered my documents, a soft voice from behind me said, "Delara." I turned. It was Aunt Helen. I hadn't seen her in over a decade. She looked older, tired, but her eyes were firm. "They did the same to me," she said. "Years ago. They changed my name on our father's will, said I'd signed away my share. I didn't. I never did. But no one believed me." She paused. "You're not alone." Her words landed like a verdict, final and undeniable. It wasn't just me. This was a legacy of betrayal. Back in the elevator, I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. For the first time, the weight on my chest didn't feel suffocating. It felt like armor I'd finally learned how to carry. As we pulled out of the parking garage, my phone buzzed. "Hey sis, want to talk? Just us." I stared at the screen. I wasn't sure if I owed her silence or something louder. Friday morning started like most others. Quiet, uneventful, deceptively calm. But by lunchtime, that silence cracked open. The email came from a burner address. No signature, no context. Just an apology, a PDF attachment, and a subject line that read, "I couldn't keep quiet anymore." I opened it without hesitation. The attached statement was from the notary who signed off on Callista's lottery claim. I was pressured. I was told it was urgent family business. I now understand the signature I validated was not authentic. I regret participating under false pretenses. I read it 3 times. There it was. Someone inside their web was starting to unravel. Not because they had to, but because their conscience refused to stay buried. That same afternoon, I received an invite to a charity gala hosted by a mutual family acquaintance. It had been forwarded through my business email from an address I didn't recognize. At first, I considered deleting it, but something made me open the RSVP list. Callista's name was there, listed not as a guest, but as the keynote speaker. Title: Overcoming Family Turmoil to Rebuild Dreams. I nearly laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was strategic. The event was scheduled for Saturday night. Black tie, donor-heavy, the kind of crowd where image meant everything. I went, not to sabotage, but to see it for myself. The venue was glossy and modern, all uplighting and photo booths. Vera and Alton mingled with ease, their hands full of wine glasses and curated sympathy. Callista stood on stage in a sleek navy dress, basking under soft spotlights. The host introduced her with reverence. A resilient entrepreneur who turned pain into purpose. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen behind her, where childhood photos of the two of us faded in and out like some badly written redemption arc. I slipped away from the crowd and found the event coordinator near the catering table. "Excuse me," I said. "Was there a different speaker initially booked for tonight?" She smiled politely. "Actually, yes. We reached out to you first. Never heard back. Callista's team said you were unavailable." I felt it then. Cold, sharp recognition. They hadn't just stolen my money or my name. They had stolen the story. I asked if there was a quiet room upstairs. somewhere I could take a call. Instead, I took out my laptop. I had uploaded the footage in advance: the safe, the theft, the signature breakdown. I invited 2 of the top donors, quietly and directly, to watch. I didn't explain. I let the footage speak. Neither of them said much afterward, but I noticed they didn't return to their seats. I didn't speak on stage. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't confront her publicly. I didn't need to. By Sunday morning, Callista's TikTok account was set to private. Her PR firm dropped her from 2 upcoming panels. Vera posted a vague quote about healing in silence. Alton deactivated his Facebook. And me? I sat on my couch with a cup of coffee and checked my email. There it was. Subject line simple: "Would you be willing to do an interview?" I read it twice. I wasn't chasing cameras, but maybe it was time someone saw the full picture. By Monday morning, the world had moved on. Callista's feed was quiet. Her carefully staged sadness had stopped appearing on my screen. The texts and media calls had slowed. People's curiosity had a shelf life, and apparently, mine had expired. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. I sat by my window with a cup of tea I didn't finish, letting the steam blur the glass. No more panels, no interviews, no viral videos. Just me, the city, and a strangely quiet email inbox. At 10, I walked to my financial advisor's office. I had scheduled the review weeks ago, before everything blew up. Part of me wanted to cancel, but the other part, the one still trying to build something real beneath all the ashes, knew I had to go. Michelle, my advisor, greeted me with a smile and a folder. "Something flagged in your background report," she said. "Probably nothing, but I thought you should see it." I opened the folder. It was an old life insurance policy, taken out 7 years ago, under my name. The beneficiaries: Vera Prescott and Callista Prescott. The signature: mine. Except I had no memory of signing it. Then it came rushing back. A vague moment during a hospital stay, when I was recovering from a medical procedure. Mom had brought in paperwork. "Just insurance stuff," she'd said, "in case anything ever happens." I was loopy, groggy, still coming down from anesthesia. I signed. Back then, I believed she did things to protect me. Now I understood. It wasn't about protecting me, it was about owning me. I closed the folder slowly and handed it back. "Thank you, Michelle. I'll take care of it." She offered to call legal counsel. I declined. I left the office and walked a few blocks before realizing I had no destination. No errands, no obligations, just a head full of noise I couldn't shake. I got home and sat at my desk, opened my laptop, drafted an email to Mom. "I forgive you, not because you asked, because I'm choosing to walk forward without carrying this anymore." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted it. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't have to be delivered to be real. It didn't need applause. It didn't need validation. It just needed to exist inside me, quietly. That night, I pulled out my suitcase. I didn't even know where I was going yet. I just knew I needed to go somewhere that was mine. No ghosts, no expectations, just me. I booked a trip to Santa Fe, a place I'd always wanted to visit but never prioritized. The confirmation email chimed. "See you soon, Santa Fe." The mornings in Santa Fe held a different kind of quiet. Not the stillness of tension or waiting, but something freer. Light slipped through the sheer curtains, painting soft gold across the adobe walls of the small rental I'd booked for 2 weeks, but was already thinking of extending. No phone buzzed, no unread messages, no social media storm waiting to devour me whole. Just silence. I wandered barefoot to the table where I'd left my suitcase partially unpacked. Inside the side pocket was a small velvet box. I hadn't thought of it since packing. It had been sitting in my nightstand drawer for months, untouched. I opened it. The necklace Mom had given me last Christmas sat inside. A delicate silver chain with a tiny heart-shaped pendant. She'd said it was her mother's, passed down through generations. A piece of Prescott legacy. I flipped the clasp over and noticed something I hadn't before: a faint engraving. I searched the code online. It was a bulk promotional item. Wholesale, mass manufactured. Value, $99.99. I didn't cry. I laughed, once, short and breathy, and then I zipped the box shut. That afternoon, I drove out past the edge of the city, where the desert opened into a stretch of sage and ochre hills. I parked near a ridge and walked until I found a lone tree, standing stubbornly against the wind. No ceremony, no speech. I dug a small hole with my hands and dropped the box in. "That was the last weight you gave me," I whispered, "and I'm not carrying it anymore." Back at the rental, I logged into my financial portal. The trust fund, originally structured by Dad's accountant with shared family goals in mind, was still sitting in limbo, unassigned. I rewrote the charter. The new recipient: a foundation for first-generation women entrepreneurs. I named it the Verity Fund, not Vengeance. Truth. Late Sunday evening, a letter arrived at the front desk. Handwritten envelope, no return address. I opened it in the quiet of my room, half expecting poison, half expecting performance. But it was plain. Callista's handwriting, stiff, cautious. "I know you'll never forgive me, but I had to say it once. You deserved more. You always did." No ask, no manipulation, no guilt. I read it twice. Then I folded it and tucked it into my journal. No response. But this time, my hands didn't shake. Not from anger, not from grief. Just stillness. The next day, I scheduled a visit to a local radio station. A friend of Romy's had connected me with a podcast producer who was doing a series on family estrangement and financial abuse. I told my story. Every layer. Not with bitterness, not with theatrics, but with clarity. I spoke about boundaries, about the soft kind of theft that hides behind smiles, about what it means to be the one who always forgives until there's nothing left to forgive. The hardest part, I said into the microphone, wasn't losing the money. It was realizing I never had a family to lose. Months passed. Callista moved to a small town in Oregon. She worked at a local co-op and didn't post anymore. Vera and Alton sold the house to cover legal debts. I heard they'd downsized to a condo in Fort Collins. No one ever brought up the necklace again. One evening, I sat on the porch of a small adobe home I'd rented long-term. The sunset washed the sky in colors I didn't have names for. I watched it in silence. Alone, but not lonely. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to stop asking permission to live. There's a strange kind of strength that comes when you stop waiting for apologies that were never meant to come. I used to believe setting boundaries was selfish, that protecting my peace somehow meant betraying my family. But the truth is, you are allowed to say no. You are allowed to step away. And you are absolutely allowed to choose a life that doesn't center around people who only show up when they need something from you. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your own family, or like your silence was mistaken for agreement, know this: your voice matters. Not because it's loud, but because it's yours. And maybe your story isn't exactly like mine. Maybe you haven't had someone forge your signature or steal your lottery ticket, but I'll bet you've felt manipulated, overlooked, or guilted into shrinking to make others more comfortable. So here's what I've learned. Family isn't defined by obligation. It's defined by respect. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt the weight of family expectations? What boundary did you set that changed everything? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. If this story resonated with you, comment 1, so I know you felt it too. And hey, if it didn't, I'd still love to hear why. Every perspective matters here. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful, true-to-life journeys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. We've got some incredible stories coming your way. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, you don't need permission to live a life that's truly your own.